Hey, I'm Mike Stockton from Fratello.
I'm RJ, also from Fratello.
And we're here to talk to you today about vintage Seiko divers. Wrote an article a couple years back where we went through all of Seiko's vintage divers, basically from their inception up to 1980. And it was pretty well received, so we thought today we would spend some time going through each of the models, talk a little bit about when they were made, size of the watch, some things to watch out for if you're looking to collect these, and yeah, we'll talk a little bit about value as well.
So let's start with the first one.
Absolutely.
I guess this is the oldest
of
the bunch. Can you say something about this one?
Sure. So kicking things off here is a watch that doesn't look like a diver, and that's because it's not. But most people consider the Seiko Chronos, which is J13046, to be Seiko's first pre-diver. And you can see it doesn't have a rotating bezel. This version that I have doesn't have luminous on the dial, although there is a version with that. I'd like to have one of those, but tough to find. And it is marked with a 50-meter depth rating and 50-meter waterproof. So this was pretty serious depth for Seiko, which up until that time was doing a lot of just standard dress watches. And it's a bit stealthy because from the front, it's just got kind of a basic silver dial with some applied indices. And if you flip it over, that's where things get a little bit interesting. So it's actually a two-part case back. So you've got kind of a retaining ring that screws in and the main case back below it. And this helped bring that water resistance up. And if you look closely, and you can see that there's a seahorse on the back. So I think all of us who are interested in Seiko know that they like to put a lot of imagery on the back of their watches. And we didn't have a tsunami at this point, but we had a seahorse. So pretty cool watch. These are not what I would call simple to find in decent condition. And the case backs, I mean, you can see, RJ, it's not deeply inscribed. They often wear off.
Is there anything particular that you need to look out for when searching for these watches?
So I think with all Seikos, you want to look really closely at the information down at the bottom of the dial. Kind of at 6 o'clock, there's some really small writing. Usually there, the model name is called out and it should correspond with the case. Obviously on a watch like this that was meant to be a little bit sporty, you want to check for water entry, and you have to assume with these older Seikos, unfortunately, that you're probably going to need to buy a donor watch if it's not running well to source some parts. Things like winding pinions often go, and yeah, you'll have to do that because we've found that the stocks at places like Seiko Netherlands that have all the old parts often don't carry these pre-8-digit serial number spare parts anymore. So you got to do a bit of your home cooking. Mm-hmm. I found this one in Japan, like a lot of the watches you'll see today. And these go for anywhere from, sometimes you can pick them up for as little as a couple $100 up to could be the high hundreds if you're talking about a black dial or something that's fully luminous that's in really good condition.
It looks really nice. It really looks like a dress watch. It could be a King Seiko or something.
Yeah, yeah.
Or Lord Marvel, but as soon as you turn it around, it becomes the awkward.
Something else is going on
exactly.
There, right?
It's very nice.
Yeah, and it's 35 millimeters with an 18 millimeter strap, so it's not big, but this is the kind of watch that I think when you put it on, it's got pretty chunky lugs. It fits pretty well.
Looks nice. Also, applied hour markers have this facets on it. There's a facet on the lugs. It's a nice waterproof dress watch, I would say.
Yeah, and it's manual wind, so that's kind of neat too. In fact, it is the only manual wind watch we're going to see today, and the crown is actually signed SW, so I believe that's Seiko waterproof.
Okay. Then I see 3 watches that look very similar.
Yeah.
And it already looks a bit like a diver's watch. I don't know exactly why, perhaps because of the crown position or something.
Yeah. So let's actually go into these two. So following that up, so that watch was approximately 1961. In 1961 to 1964, Seiko debuted the Silver Wave, and they debuted it again with 50 meters, so kind of a partner watch to that Chronos we just looked at, and also again with a two-part case back with a retainer ring. But we get our first ever sign of the now famous tsunami motif on the case back that is still used today on Seiko divers. And these 50 millimeter watches have an internal bezel that can be rotated with the crown that sits at 4 o'clock. So we get a 4 o'clock crown, which is kind of a Seiko hallmark. We get the tsunami, and we get a thicker crystal. Like if you flip that on the side, RJ, you can see it's kind of chunky.
Yeah, a bit of a box-shaped crystal.
Yeah, and these came in a number of dial styles. The two I have here are like a silvery white dial. There's some with like kind of a star pattern, some with a dark dial, and they are not easy to find in good condition. I mean, there were periods when I was looking, especially places like eBay, where you'd see like 1 or 2 of these come up a year, and they're usually pretty heavily contested. These I got from Japan. They needed some work. The one that RJ is holding right now actually has its original bracelet, and
it has a spring, so it stretches.
Yeah, it's cool. It's
nice.
Actually kind of like you know, whether it's Doxa Expandro or the old 1039 Omega bracelets, they stretch a little bit for your wrist, and yeah, really nicely made. The thing you have to watch out for these, of course, is just turning that crown and making sure the bezel still works, because they're just little plastic gears there. And if they're stripped, I mean, you're really talking about it either just never working again, or again, having to find a donor Silver Wave to put in there. So the next watch, and by the way, that Silver Wave is the J12082, and it's about a 36 millimeter watch. The next one, this was kind of a weird move. In 1964 until approximately 66, Seiko actually downshifted and went to a 30 millimeter or 30 meter Silver Wave instead of a 50 meter. So they actually came out with a less capable watch to replace a more capable one. And this watch has a similar diameter, 1 millimeter up at 37, so it's actually bigger than the original Silver Wave. But again, it's a less capable watch. It's got a snap case back. Again, it brings in tsunami, but it's yeah, less capable, but I actually think it's a pretty nice watch with its 37 millimeter diameter. And here again, these are kind of tough to find. You know, these Silver Waves, again, had sporting intentions, so a lot of them show water damage. This one, the silver dials actually turn kind of pink over time. But
it's like with salmon.
Yeah, but it's in good condition.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah.
Then moving on to the next one, I think this one is recognizable for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I think we covered it also separately on Fratello.
Yeah, this is probably one of the most famous Seiko vintage divers, and this is the famous 62 Mas, known as the 6217. And the model that we've got here, all of these were 37 millimeter cases, and with 150 meters of water resistance. So Seiko was really stepping it up here. You know, they were really answering to the growing popularity of diving and you know, recreational diving by people that really took off in the 60s. And they went with a really traditional skin diver case that was used by a lot of Swiss companies. And funny enough, Citizen also came out with a diver at this time with a really similar case. So like I said, 37 millimeters, bidirectional bezel. The model you see here, if you take that strap off, RJ, is actually a really, really early production piece, so from 1965. And they made the 6217 from like 65 to 67. And this is from the first month or so of production. And you can tell that, of course, from the date. It's like from April.
Yeah, April, yeah.
And it has a smaller crown than the watches that would come only a couple months later and last throughout the production run. And I found this one, I think it came from somewhere like Baltimore on eBay, and it had terrible photos. You know, it was about...
Those are the best.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, especially with Seiko. I mean, you usually can end up getting a great watch, and sure enough, it came, and the dial was what I thought it was. These 62 Mas really hung around in like the $1,500 range forever and ever and ever, and now they're, you know, $2,500 to $4,000, just depending on condition. And they're really nice. I mean, at 37 millimeters with that chunky style, they fit really well. You know, with that gray dial, it really brought in, you know, some colors and some general designs that, you know, are still with us today. The style of the bezel, the font, that type of thing. Funny enough, this one actually had a dolphin on the case back, so there was no tsunami. It's like they stepped away from it for a while. But good looking watch.
Automatic movement?
Automatic. Typical of Seiko on all the automatics we've seen so far, non-hand winding. So, you know, it's kind of got the magic lever that you just shake and let it go. But good watch, not my favorite. We're coming up to my favorites right now, and these are really kind of the let's call it the jewels of the vintage Seiko collection. These
look a lot like my modern Marine Master.
Yeah. So what RJ is holding here is the 6215 7000 from 1967. And this was kind of made concurrently with the 62 Mas towards the end of its production life. But this represented a really interesting step for Seiko. They were starting to address the professional diver market. So those folks doing saturation diving, deep water welding, just extended periods of work underwater. And, you know, if you look at this watch compared to the Rolexes and the Omegas of the time, it's really different. Mono case, so it front loads, which is really unique. It's big at like 44 millimeters. It has a mineral crystal, so no acrylic here. It does have a bidirectional bezel, and it's a neat watch. This one actually has a high jewel count development of the 62 Mas movement, and it's also non-hand winding. It does have a quick set date though, but this is gorgeous. Very, very hard to find. Seiko on this one used a tritium style of lume, which was not common for them, and that's why these often turn quite yellow compared to other Seiko divers of the time.
So you have 3 of these here.
Yeah.
What are the main differences?
Yeah, so this watch lasted for 1 year. Okay, they made this for 1 year in 1967. Really tough to find. You know, you're talking prices that often top $10,000 for these. So, you know, you're into like some pretty heavy company there. And forgot to mention on these, you also get the introduction of a screw down crown. So the big difference. So if I take this watch from 1967 versus the next 2 here, which are from 68 and 69, these are the 6159s. And these introduce a high beat movement. So if you remember around that time in the late 60s, you had the introduction of high beat movements by Girard-Perregaux and also Seiko. Zenith. And these guys were really chasing that ultra high accuracy that would soon be toppled by Quartz. Yeah. So these, the 68 and 69, 6159 models had this high beat movement. And if you've never seen a high beat movement in action, it's pretty incredible. I mean, the hands just glide. They just glide. Now, case-wise, pretty darn similar to the 6215.
Yep.
Instead of the bezel changes. So on the 6215, it's kind of downward sloping, where it's much flatter and much more similar to the modern Marine Master 300. The dial changes as well. So the indices are slightly different. Although they both retain what's called the stoplight sweep second hand that vintage Seikos are pretty well known for. Quick set date, these actually introduce hand winding, so you can actually hand wind these high beat movements. These are also quite valuable. They kind of sit in that same realm as the 6215, probably a little less expensive. Show you a couple details here that are interesting on the 68 versus 69 model. In 69, for some reason, they added this ring here, kind of an inscribed ring. And I don't know, RJ, if that was for gripping onto a wetsuit or something like that. But
I think so, because it's monoblock, so it's...
Yeah, it's like smooth otherwise, right? Some differences in the crowns in these 2 years. So little changes year over year. They were kind of constantly toying with things and making little updates.
Yeah.
The 67 model doesn't say professional. The 6159s introduced the word professional, which I find kind of funny, like Speedmaster timing, this is when they put professional on as well.
Yeah.
So you never really know, were they looking at other brands saying, okay, let's put professional on because that's a great marketing ploy.
I think it was to distinct dress watch and a bit sporty watches to watches that were capable of professional use. And I think that went through all these brands like Rolex, because they also say the Submariner, the Explorer, those are professional watches. Same goes for the Omega trilogy, like the Railmaster, the Speedmaster, and the Seamaster 300, also professional watches. I think Seiko did more or less the same. So there, it's branding, or it's on the dial, but I also think it's just to distinct certain part of the collection.
Yeah, yeah,
and I think what people would like to know is, where do you look for these watches? Is it eBay, or is it Chrono 24, or is it another platform? What's the best place to look for these watches? Vintage shops in Japan, or?
Yeah, it's mostly vintage shops in Japan. I mean, these watches did sell in other markets, but not heavily. Not heavily. They were really a lot of JDM type things, and maybe you had people in the military bringing them back. But Japan is really the best place, and they're more popular there. If you can find one outside of Japan, sometimes you can get a better deal, honestly. But it's hard to find them. And yeah, they can be tough to service as well. These 6159 high beats particularly are hard to service. Getting parts it's very difficult because there are no other watches that really share the movement. Yeah. And you're really, like in the case of the one in my right hand, the mainspring actually, I think, is kind of repaired, but it wasn't replaced because we couldn't find one. Yeah. One other kind of interesting point about this is the 6159 7001. That's the later model from 69 versus the 7000 from 68. This one actually has a service dial on it. And normally in the vintage watch world, that would be a mega no-no. Yeah? But these service dials are actually quite rare. And you can tell it's a service dial because in the 1969, 1970 era, things switched from being waterproof to water resist. And I think it was my home country, the USA, that sort of put that regulation in place. But this actually has a resist dial, which was a later dial. So somebody went in to get this serviced and had the dial switch probably to up the loom. And
do you know when it was replaced? From what year is the service dial?
So there's no real proof on this, but what's interesting is that Seiko canceled this watch after 69. And there are some people who feel that this service dial isn't a service dial, and they were just actually dials that were put into these watches that had, been cased in 69, but not really fully assembled and were sold later. And then there are some people who think, yeah, this was probably made starting in 1970 as a replacement, and perhaps would have been original had Seiko continued to make them. So there's no real proof about what they are.
Interesting.
Yeah, but like I said, it's kind of like a weird case where a service dial is actually valuable, and the Seiko completist would probably want to have one. If not in a watch, they'd probably want to have a dial separate.
What surprises me a bit is, now that I think of it, I have the Marine Master from 2015, which is the SBDX001.
Yeah.
There's a 017, and I think now it's not officially called Marine Master anymore, just a
just the 300
meters. Yep. But I think one of the first Marine Masters was from 2000 or 2002.
Mm-hmm.
And how similar it looks to these ones from 68 and 69.
Yeah.
So back in 2000 or 2002, Seiko was already capable of doing like a really true re-edition or homage to something from late 60s.
Absolutely.
Where other brands picked up much later on this re-edition thing.
Yeah, and I can't remember the original marketing materials for the Marine Master 300, if they actually called out these watches or not. Funny enough, like Seiko usually just forgets the 6215 and goes right into the high beat when they bring up their vintage divers because they like the professional name, they like the high beat movement.
All better marketing fluff.
Yeah, exactly. And but you're right. I mean, the Marine Master 300 takes directly from these watches. You know, the case sides and everything. It's really, really similar. And I mean, I think it shows that back then they came up with a great design.
Yeah.
You know, one other little point is that the service dial watch actually came on this orange strap, which I'd not really seen this before. These came on kind of a black strap that was similar to this, pretty valuable. The orange strap was actually an option. So kind of a neat strap, super long to go over a wetsuit. You know, signed Seiko.
It's still okay-ish? At some point they become a bit plasticky and...
it's pretty good. I'm not going to wear it, but kind of a neat little accessory. I mean, I think we all wonder what kind of lives these watches have lived over the last 50 years, and somehow this thing got a service dial but kept its strap. So.
And where do we go from there?
So now we're going to go into some 150 meter divers after the 300. So what's interesting about these is that, like I said, Seiko stopped them in 69. And as we'll see later, apparently they got some word from some saturation divers that the crystals were popping off, you know, due to nitrogen entering the case and or helium. And Seiko just sort of cut it off and they stopped making these professional divers. But they did continue to make divers for the more recreational set at 150 meters of water resistance. So
the famous 6105?
Yeah, so the 6105, and the first model we're going to talk about is the Dash 8000, 8009. And this watch came around in 1968 and was made until approximately 69. And this is sort of like just a very, you could now kind of call it a traditional C-case diver, and about 41 millimeters, and these are really, really nice. They fit really well. It's got a pull-in, push-in, push-out crown, also a bidirectional bezel. It kind of like the higher depth rating watches. It's got the stoplight sweep hand, mineral crystal, and also came on kind of a really a cool rubber strap.
With a little hot nail on it.
Yeah, and this one is actually original.
So you could say that this is the ancestor of the famous XKX 007.
Yeah, it's actually, you're right, because those aren't really professional and was sort of made for that just more recreational diver, doing snorkeling and light diving. And these...
And some multi-featuring.
Well, yeah, with the next one for sure. So after a couple years, this was replaced by another 6105, and that's the 8110, 8119. And this is the Captain Willard. So if you've ever watched Apocalypse Now with Martin Sheen, this is the watch he's wearing.
This looks a bit more UFO shaped. The case.
Yeah. I like to call it like an amoeba. It's sort of like this really
organic,
flowing organic shape.
Yeah.
And you know, a lot of people really like the Captain Willard a lot better than the earlier model. I was kind of that camp as well. I'm honestly torn. I mean, I think this is a cleaner looking watch, but that is certainly a more unique design. And I think the fact that it brings in this sort of asymmetrical crown guard, which we'll see later in a lot of Seiko divers, is pretty cool. And you know, this one brought along also some more innovation. It's got a click bezel, so you can actually you can feel it when you turn it, and it's got a really
unidirectional.
Yeah, so it goes unidirectional, and it's also got a really weird, pretty unsuccessful attempt at sort of a screw down crown. It's almost like a bayonet style. You push it in and you twist it and it sort of falls into place. And it's got kind of like a neat little lock and an arrow on there. These, if you look case back wise, sort of a horseshoe on the back with some information. This is a really late model, so 76. So this one, they had stopped doing that and just kind of put some basic information.
Yeah.
But really nice watches. These have really gone up in price in the last couple of years, especially the Willard, because they did a reissue a couple of years back. You used to be able to find these for anywhere from $800 to $1,000. You know, really good ones now are probably $1,500 to over $2,000. And these are a lot more findable internationally. You can find them everywhere because they were popular. These were really popular, of course, with Vietnam, U.S. soldiers there.
Yeah.
So.
And can you get spare parts for this? Because what I heard from our watchmaker Paul Diva is that a lot of these vintage Seikos, they have been worn day in, day out for years and years, and many of them didn't see any servicing, so a lot of parts are worn out.
Yeah.
So if he gets one for service, it's really really difficult to get spare parts.
It can be difficult. I mean, some of these movement families were related to others, so you know, Seiko made a ton of watches back then, and you know that you can harvest parts from other watches, but to find them naturally, like things like crystals, sometimes there are aftermarket crystals that are pretty good. But to find original ones, for example, are really, really tough, and you can't polish these. I mean, I've seen people try, and but it's tough. Like this one, I mean, I would love to replace both of these crystals, but on the other hand, they're kind of good enough.
Neat. Yeah.
And yeah, they have some history behind them. Both of these watches wear really well on account of having, you know, relatively short lugs. The big guy over here comes in at 44 millimeters, so it is a slab of a watch, and you can feel the weight difference on these too. I mean, it's fairly notable. Yeah. But you know, this is where a lot of Seiko collectors start. Honestly, these are two very popular references. This one was actually what got me into it, and I still remember I ordered this one from Philippines, which is a pretty dangerous place to order vintage Seiko. There's a lot of redials and fakes watches and things like that. Yeah, it's very humid climate, so a lot of the watches have had a tough time over the years. But it was a good watch, and yeah, I mean, it took, I think, going into Germany, it took like 2 months to get there.
Yeah.
And then customs held it for 3 weeks.
Of course, our friends from customs.
So
now it looks like we are going a bit back to more toned down watches. I won't say dress watches, but a bit more toned down. These three.
Yeah. And I think, you know, we're basically talking about, we've talked basically about, you know, the early beginnings of Seiko divers, then we've gotten into some more professional watches, we've talked about 150 meter recreational divers. So around this time, and we know Seiko for a long time has kind of offered something for everyone. So they had professional divers, they had recreational divers, and then they had what was called sports divers. And these would be more akin to the Seiko 5 Sports that are out right now.
Exactly.
So Seiko introduced a line in roughly 1968 called the Sports Diver. And these were 70 meter water resistant, waterproof divers. And they would make loads of different models for the next several years. I'm not going to walk through all those vintage sport divers. We've got an article on those that have gained nicknames over time because they're the most famous. Some of them you may know, like the rally divers, things like that. But we wanted to talk just briefly about the very first sports diver. And these are the 6106, 8100, and 8109.
All the same but different dials, or is there more differences?
They're all the same, just different dials.
Okay.
So the kind of the plain dials with these applied indices, they made silver, they made dark gray, they made green, they made yellow, but they also made this really funky one with
IKEA blue.
Yeah, IKEA blue, and
And printed
Yeah, printed
minerals,
indices.
indexes.
And
Yeah.
you can actually see that there's a lighter blue surrounding the darker blue.
Yeah.
It's actually a really pretty dial.
The minute track is lighter.
Yeah.
It's nice.
So,
Sunburst.
and they use this dial actually in another model with a slightly different case later. But I saw this one and it was hanging out on eBay forever. Somebody was selling it out of Hawaii of all places. And they had a ridiculous price on it. And I finally thought, well, I'm going to send the person an offer for well below that. And they sold it. And it's these are really nice. They come in at 37 millimeters. They use the 6106 movement, which was a workhorse for Seiko in the late 60s and 70s. It features a day and a date. If you push in the crown, you can change the day or the date.
Okay. Yeah.
And they have a screw down case back. Nothing too fancy, quite a slim case, acrylic crystal, and a really nice bidirectional bezel.
It's interesting that it went from unidirectional to bidirectional again. Well, this is
Kind of
perhaps
a light,
even more recreational than these ones.
yeah, kind of a light model. And these are really nice. I mean, you can still find these for anywhere from a couple $100 up to, you know, $600-700 depending on condition. And they did come with bracelets. I think I've got one in the drawer somewhere, but the bracelets were quite delicate, and most of them are long gone. So I usually just throw them on like a 19 millimeter strap.
I have a question. So far, do you have any idea about the prices back then? Were these professional watches back then relatively expensive?
Yeah, they were relatively expensive, and I think that there are some old ads we've put in some of our articles, and I can't really recall, but you know, they were on the order of.
So like same as a Submariner or a Seamaster 300?
I think they were a little less expensive, especially because I think at that time the Japanese yen was, you know, the dollar and other currencies were pretty strong against it. But certainly for Japan, they were very expensive watches. I want to say these were several $100s at the time, which, yeah, was a lot of money at that point.
And these watches were inexpensive like a SKX 007 was until a year ago or something.
I think that these were probably still a couple $100, and these you were probably talking 150 to 200, somewhere in there. And these ads you can still find in English because, yeah, these were really marketed more globally.
Nice. Okay.
So then
where do we go? The Tuna, the grandfather Tuna, 1975.
Yeah, and this is, I mean, it's just one of the most, I think, one of the most iconic Seiko designs. There's probably not a more, I think this and like the Pro-Prof probably strike me as about the most functional looking dive watches I've ever seen. I mean, they're not going to kid you that they're going to be worn in other types of events. So yeah, 1975, it took basically from 1969 or whenever the old 6159 was discontinued, it took Seiko 5-6 years for them to come out with another professional dive watch. So they really took seriously that they weren't making a product that was working for professional saturation divers. And what they came out with was a watch with basically the same movement, but an entirely different design.
Titanium and ceramics?
Titanium, ceramic, also a front-loading case, really thick L-shaped gasket to keep things together, so no helium valve. They just decided to seal things as tightly as possible, and massive, like absolutely massive. And the other thing I don't have on this one, I don't have its original rubber strap that's able to, you know, basically expand and contract under pressure. Yeah. And this is a neat piece. I remember I found this one in Nakano, Japan. I was in some little mall with, if you're familiar with going to like an antique mall in the US where you've got all these little stalls.
Yeah.
It was basically a mall of all these little individual consignment shops.
Yeah.
And there was like this rockabilly salesman sitting in there reading a comic book, and I asked him to open up a showcase, and there this was for something like $1,200.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's a steal.
Yeah, it was good, and thankfully I had a friend of mine from Japan there who had access to a cash machine because it was cash only.
Okay, of course.
And yeah, I had to pay him back, which was fine, but I brought this home, and these original grandfather tunas, I mean, you had one.
Yeah.
They now sell for anywhere from $3,000 to like $4,500.
Yeah, depending on condition a bit, yeah.
And I think, look, it's 50 millimeters, but it's 50 millimeters all the way around. So, lug to lug, you're talking about something that's really not all that different from other watches, but you can see it's truly thick.
Massive. Yeah.
Yeah. But, nothing like it. Just really well made, and yeah, I really like these a lot. As much as I don't wear them frequently, I just think they're super cool. I think they're really, really neat. And so in 1975, you had this. In 1978, Seiko followed this up with the 75-49-7000 golden tuna.
With a quartz movement.
With a quartz movement. So you have a titanium gold nitride case. Yeah. And this, you talk about pricing. I want to say that, if I remember correctly, this retailed for something like 80,000 Japanese yen, and the quartz version retailed for 160,000 Japanese yen. So it was double the price of the mechanical version, which tells you how expensive quartz was and how wild it was back at that time.
Yeah.
So these golden tunas, I mean, the nice thing about these is you can still find these for, $1,500 or so. The movement is a fully jeweled quartz movement, so it can be repaired. And I mean, my history with these is that they run flawlessly. They run beautifully. They really don't require a battery change that often. And this one even has its original gold buckle. So
nice.
Super cool watch. I know a lot of people don't really fancy quartz, but I think you kind of have to give this credit because at that time, what is that now, 42 years ago? That was a big deal.
Yeah.
It's a really big deal. So, yeah, there we are, the golden tuna. 1978 was a big year, and we're kind of like jumping ahead of the last couple ones we'll speak about, but we'll come back to those because they lasted a lot longer. So 1978 was a big year. They came out with the golden tuna, and at the same time they debuted two other dive watches, and they addressed the professional market not needing 600 meters of water resistance, but they addressed one needing only 300 meters. So, I mean, I don't know about you, but for me, 300 meters would probably do it. And this was the debut of what is known as the Tuna can. And that is the 75-49-70-10. So you've got 75-49-7000 and the 70-10. And this one brought in Tuna looks, but it's got a screw-down case back.
It looks updated. It looks more modern. It is more modern, but yeah.
And I think, for people who are interested in the Seiko tunas, these original 75-49s, I mean, in my view, are, they've got vintage cred, so these are now old watches, but these come in at a really, really wearable 47 millimeters all the way around. So, and they're not so thick, so you can actually wear one of these. And, I mean, you can slip that on your wrist.
Yeah, it's nice.
And this is pretty similar to the 300-meter tunas that are made today. Basically the same size. So that one you could really wear day in and day out. I mean, I've seen people pair them with leather straps and different things like that, which some people think is a no-no, but, if that keeps you wearing the watch daily, then you can do that.
And how's the supply on these?
Really not bad. You can find these pretty much all day long for about $750, which I think is a great deal.
Yeah.
You need to watch out for sometimes things like bezels and even dials or hands are replaced. So, you need to do your homework a bit, but these I think are still just a great opportunity.
Yeah.
And then, the last watch we'll talk about in this Quartz series is probably, when you really think about it, one of the most important watches released in the last 40-something years. And that is the 7548. This one is a 700C. And at roughly 42.5 millimeters in diameter, you will take one look at this and say, ah, that's an SKX. So it's pretty interesting to note that the SKX and now the Seiko 5 Sports models got their start as a Quartz watch in 1978. And this watch used the same movement as the one we just spoke about, so fully jeweled movement, repairable, available the black dial, this orange dial, and I think there was like a Pepsi version.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, there's not too much to say about this in the sense of how it wears, because I think everybody knows how an SKX wears.
Exactly.
Or the new Seiko 5 Sports models wear.
Yeah.
This one has a screw-down crown, and how many meters was this? Was this 200 meters or 150?
150.
So this was 150, and these were made into the 80s, actually.
So there's a scale on the case back.
Yeah, so Seiko would actually
It's battery change.
tell you when the battery, yeah, you could actually get a little mark into the case when you last changed the battery.
Oh.
And it also helps you, I mean, if you look at the serial number to see when it was made.
81?
Yeah, some of these models span decades, so you can kind of tell when it was made based on when the scale starts as well.
Yeah, so I see 85, 87,
Yeah,
1990. It had the battery change in 92.
yeah.
Nice.
And this one's actually on its original strap, which has seen better days, but
That's original.
But
it becomes quite hard, like more plastic-like.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I have a few of those, of old Seikos.
And these are really findable. I mean, you can find these for a few $100. And to me, yeah, I think that's kind of like the original Tuna can. These are like really where you've got some great value in vintage Seiko. And yes, they're quartz, I get it. So you kind of have to get over that, but still cool looking watches, for sure.
Okay, now it feels like we're going to take a step back in time with these two.
Yeah, so we're gonna step back.
6309?
Yeah, with the 6309 and the 6306. So these two watches are what's known as the Turtle, and that's probably one of also one of Seiko's most famous dive watches. So here we also get the tsunami motif back.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think of the Turtle as a pure 80s watch, and that's actually not the case. The Turtle actually debuted in 1976 and was made well into the 80s. And we've got two kind of early references here. So if I look at the 6309 in my hand here, this is from 1977.
The 78.
And you've got a 6306 from 1978. So the 6306 differs from the 7309 in that it hacks, and you can check. I believe it hand winds. You can try that out. But the 6306 was primarily a Japanese model. I believe they sold them in other regions, but primarily Japanese. And they do sell for more money on the secondary market. The 6309 is incredibly common, but increasingly uncommon to find a good one. And
yeah.
you and I both know this.
Yeah, I bought one a few years ago. I think you helped me sourcing one, and I was lucky that it was from another Seiko collector who also was a watchmaker, and yeah, got it back in a good condition, and it runs. It's a good watch.
Yeah, so they're good watches, but because they were so popular and they were pretty affordable, they were used. And a lot of them as well did suffer from water entry, and there was a massive, and still is a massive, aftermarket Franken parts.
A lot of them have been slaughtered.
Yeah, cottage industry. So hands, dials. So dials, I remember looking at one in Japan that I was very close to buying. It had this cool plastic case guard on it that was like a Seiko accessory. Yeah. Kind of like you would buy a Swatch bumper back in the day. And then I got out the loop and I looked at the bottom and it said Hong Ko. and I went on my BlackBerry at the time and found out Hongko was a surefire fake.
Yeah.
So it was a fake. So you really need to look. There's some great websites out there that really talk about, you know, where the things are to look for. I mean, I've been through this with Gerard. I remember debunking all kinds of 6309s one night that he was looking at. And the other thing, I mean, this is the key on a turtle. And I know this because I bought one that suffered from this. This screw down crown, the crown tube is part of the case. And if dirt gets in there or somebody screws it on an angle and strips those threads, the case is literally a paperweight. There's nothing you can do to save it. Nothing. And I've got a case sitting in my drawer. It was a beautiful watch, but after half a turn, nothing else would happen.
Yeah.
It was done.
Pity.
Yeah, a real pity. But you see a lot of people who sell these and they either knowingly are selling one that's stripped or kind of don't show a good picture of the case back where you can see if this crown screws in. You know, 3.5 turns is roughly the advice. But these are great watches. I mean, they come in at, let me see, I think roughly 45 millimeters, but again, not huge lugs, and they fit really well. Obviously, there's a modern version of this, which I think is also a fantastic watch.
Yeah, SRP, like 777 and 775, those kind of numbers. It's a good watch. I think I have one somewhere. And
they've got all kinds of variants now.
Yeah.
I like the original. I think you know, you can still find good ones for $500-600, and you know, it's a legendary watch. And I think it's one that, you know, when people tire of them, they're very easy to sell because somebody's always looking for a turtle. So, you know, bottom line is some of these later watches we've touched upon are still really good value. They're practical to wear still every day, and you can find them.
do you expect them, let's say, from here, because I think the 6105s are also getting quite more or less expensive, that these will go up in price as well, despite the quartz movements, for example, or the fact that there were a lot of these turtles?
Yeah, I think the turtles, probably because they're mechanical, will continue to go up, and people, you know, discover them, especially those who, you know, are getting into vintage watches, and they'll keep them, wear them, realize they really like them. You know, the quartz ones, let's see. Clearly, people like myself and some others out there who want to either create a complete set of Seiko divers or have one or two in their collection, have started to pick up on these, especially like these Tuna cans, because they are wearable and they're so damn different looking. So we've seen values go up slowly. I still think that, you know, the fact that they're quartz should keep them in check for a while.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
All right.
I think it was a nice run of these vintage Seiko models up to 1980. So we should do a next video with
some newer pieces.
Some post 1980
Absolutely.
diver watches.
Yeah. So thanks for tuning in, and certainly if you have questions, hit us up on the Fratello page, and we'll be happy to answer. Thanks.
Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to our channel for more videos.